loving how you've constructed it, because people who are over controlled can often come across as so aloof and dismissive and even cold. But what we're saying is, no, these are not unfeeling people. Inside, they are deeply sensitive, but they have chosen a way, or not chosen, but they have got a way of coping that is over control. Would you say that is accurate?
Yeah, I would say that, people that have the high threat sensitivity are interpreting data as very threatening.
Yeah.
And then they're having potentially very negative emotional reactions. Or there's one little point here that I think is worth mentioning, which is sometimes for people that have high over control, they may not actually register the emotionality of something until after the fact, an hour, maybe even a day. And then they're kind of like, oh my gosh, that was really stressful to me. Why didn't I recognize it at the time?
Yeah. And
actually, one of the things that tends to happen for people is that over control can look very, very different from person to person, and which, diagnostic. But if we're just going for like characteristics, they might be like rigid, and sometimes they might have trouble with being flexible to new situations, being fearful of doing something new. They might prefer order and structure. So getting a sense of like, wanting things to be planned out would be maybe an over-controlled person. They may also feel like they don't really know how to join with people. And, we've said this characteristic of loneliness, emotional loneliness a lot. They also may tend to find that they feel very strongly about certain beliefs that they have, and that they are kind of maybe at times unwavering about those belief systems because they think they're the right thing to do. And so in general, it's this sense of structure, order, perfectionism, and particularly feeling like wanting everything to be in alignment or in a certain way. Yeah.
And how does this make life difficult?
Sure. Yeah. The thing I think about the most is like, if I'm trying to be perfect all the time, it's really hard to try and relate to another human being. Because first of all, nobody's perfect, and we know that cognitively, but when someone actually stops trying to do perfect actions all the time, they may get really down on themselves, or they might fall apart, or they might burn out because they're trying so hard. We see a ton of burnout, people that are workaholics or overworking with over control. And then the connection, in particular, we might see something that we call task over relationship, where I'm working really, really, really hard. And then I don't think about how that might affect my spouse or my kiddo. Yeah. Sometimes what we see is that there's a public persona and a private persona. So maybe at home, they are looking extremely emotional, potentially, because they're with their safe people. But in public, they might be looking very, very stoic or calm, or like they don't care about things. And then the sensitivity part of it is they might be, that they might relate to what we call that threat sensitivity, but they might not be getting sensitive about, other kinds of issues necessarily. They just sort of roll off their back.
Yeah. What about interpersonal realm? Like, because threat is not just being chased by a tiger, isn't it?
Exactly.
Just a negative comment or a friend not replying your text can feel like a threat.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things we see with people that are threat sensitive is they really are looking for, the threat in everyday situations. So, maybe you make a funny face at me and I kind of go like, oh, she doesn't like me. And that might be a threat sensitive response for an over controlled person. Other people that maybe don't have that high level of threat sensitivity are kind of like, oh, well, maybe she's, having a tough morning or something like that. They might be giving people the benefit of the doubt more. and those kind of areas. But I think for the threat sensitive person, you know, they may see expressions and they don't know how to read them, or particularly neutral expressions are very, very hard for.
Yeah, the still face experiment, which
yes,
why don't you tell us what RO-DBT is?
Sure. So I'd be happy to. So one of the things Dr. Lynch noticed as he was working actually with Dr. Marsha Linehan, who developed traditional DBT, her clinic, is that there were some people that really weren't getting better. And he started to be researching why that was. And what he found out is that a lot of these people were being told, you know, you're very dysregulated and you have all these emotions and you're impulsive, and they're kind of like, okay. And so they're just kind of going with it, because what they figure out is actually that overcontrol people at first are very polite and kind of like are trying to understand things and they want help. But what they're actually not telling you is that they don't agree with you sometimes at first, but they might tell you after the fact, or they just don't show up to therapy anymore. Yeah, which happens. And so one of the things that happened is that he started going like, what is going on with them? And actually he found out that they are distress over tolerating. So they're having all this emotion and it's not going anywhere. It's staying inside of them. And then they're developing all kinds of other issues, maybe even like psychosomatic issues. And distress
over tolerating. I get it. But I was just thinking, before this work, I think very few people would hear that and think, is that a problem?
Right.
I'm able to tolerate a huge amount of distress. Why is that a problem?
So distress over tolerance is usually made up of two things. One is this maladaptive perfectionism. And that means like having high standards in almost all areas of our life with this giant fear of failing. So I want to do everything I can to make sure that I don't fail, and I'm terrified of it. And so I work myself to the bone. And then the second part of distress over tolerance is unhealthy task perseveration. So basically continuing in a course of action and it's no longer rewarding, or there's no progress being made. So maybe I'm in a relationship and I, you know, keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, and nothing's getting better, and I don't leave it. And so that's a distress over tolerance reaction, potentially.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Or you get hit by a car and you don't really seek medical attention.
Exactly. Or something is, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, I actually have